Jeremy Mundy, thanks for talking to me. Firstly, how did you come? Why were you originally interested in translation studies? And could you tell me what you're working on at the moment?
I've studied languages at school and
Right.
at university. I studied French, German, and Latin at school, and French and Spanish at university. So I've always been interested in languages,
I'm good at them.
uh, reasonably. um, so when I studied many years ago, translation was really just a language learning activity. So we would translate both ways, and it would be a way of checking comprehension of a text and of uh, the manipulation of grammar of the foreign language. Um, but it was only later that when I was teaching that I became more interested in translation as both a professional activity and as an area of study in its own right.
Right.
And I enjoyed being a translator. I worked on translation of bilingual dictionaries and of worked for international organizations as a translator.
Okay.
And then my other interest was in linguistics.
Right.
And I brought the two together in the study of translation. And I could see applications both for the kind of corpus-based work that I was doing in dictionaries and in the kind of linguistic work that I'd studied as well, how some of these linguistic theories could be applied to translation. That's how I got started in translation studies.
And you're at the University of Leeds at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
and you've written numerous publications, including the new edition of Introducing Translation Studies. But what are you working on at the moment?
At the moment, I'm also working on another book that will be published by Routledge. It looks at translator subjectivity. It's looking at, I've termed it evaluation in translation. It adopts and modifies some linguistic theories, notably appraisal theory, which is designed to highlight the points in a text where translator's interpretation is particularly crucial.
Right.
So I apply this theory to various case studies. So I've got looking at the simultaneous interpreting of Obama's inaugural speech into different languages. Some experiments with students. And another area that I'm very interested in is the study of archives, of literary archives, of translators, and the correspondence between translators and authors, the revisions that are made at different points in a text. So it's a kind of examination of the translation process and of the translator's subjectivity.
Okay. And translation studies as a discipline today, what are the main kind of trends that you see across the discipline?
Translation studies now is a hugely different discipline from 10, 15 years ago. So it's a much evolved discipline, it's a wider discipline. So there's so much work going on in so many different areas. Sometimes it's difficult to keep on top of what's going on. One question to translation studies is whether it's possibly fragmenting, because you have some people working using eye tracking and other procedures to analyze the translator process, or to gain empirical evidence as to what is happening in the translator's mind. You've got others who are working on translator ethics, which is very interesting. Others who are working on translator training. Others who are working on theories of translation in many different historical and cultural contexts. So there's so much going on. It's difficult to actually bring them together. My hope is that there will not be a fragmentation of the discipline. I think that all of these different perspectives enrich the overall discipline of translation studies.
I mean, as a relatively new discipline, do you see that translation academics want the discipline to fragment? Is that a part of being a relatively new discipline, that there are people trying to forge their own language and their own sort of terms?
Something which does happen is a renegotiation of terminology, and so this has happened for years and years. So there would be literal and free translation, then there would be dynamic equivalence and formal equivalence, and then it would be documentary and instrumental translation, etc. One thing I see is the use of the term turn. There was a cultural turn, and then there would be another turn, another paradigm. So, but I would hope that now is the time that the discipline is looking in many different areas, but now there's a lot more empirical work being done. There's a lot more profound understanding of what translation is. So I don't think there is necessarily a desire to see the discipline fragment. I don't think that would help anyone very much. But to see all of these different areas develop and to shed complementary light over the overall phenomenon of translation.
And just finally, you obviously teach as well as research. What are the challenges that you find as a teacher, and what are the challenges that your students face coming into this subject area?
We train translators and interpreters at Leeds who are going to work professionally afterwards in the practice of translation. So there we need to give them a thorough understanding of the tools that they will use, but also a theoretical understanding of the concepts which underpin translation. So we make a strong attempt to relate the theories to the actual practice, so that students can both understand what they're doing and can reflect on what they're doing and explain what they're doing to others.
Right.
Also, we're concerned to use, say, new technology in order to enhance the teaching process. So what I don't do is give students a text, say, translate it, get them to come along and just reel off a supposed model translation.
Yeah.
I'm interested in getting them to explore the process of translation as well, working in groups, discussing online perhaps the problematic points in a text and how they're going to deal with it, and with guidance from the tutor, come to a better understanding of how decisions can be made in translation.
Okay. Well, thanks very much.
Thank you.